Well, welcome to Cedar Creek Church Online. I'm so glad that you've decided to join us today, whether you just stumbled upon the link or you're on Facebook, YouTube, or online on the website as well. Wherever you're at, we're so glad that you've decided to join us. If we haven't had the chance to meet, my name is Spencer, and I have the privilege of hanging out with students 5th through 12th grade here at Cedar Creek.
Yes, welcome, and my name is Sarah. I get to spend time with kids in kids ministry, and Spencer and I are super excited to spend this 11 o'clock service with you. We've got some shout-outs. We've got people watching from all over the country. This is cool. Sandy from Arizona. We've got Deborah in Montana, and look who else we have.
I'm a mic holder. We did this.
No. Hey, everybody. I was walking by. I heard you guys were on. And so I wanted, before I go back down, I just wanted to say, hey, thanks for joining us. And so what are you guys talking about?
We got Arizona. We've got Deborah from Montana.
Hi, Deborah.
Isn't
Great
this
to see
fun?
you. Hi, Ann.
We've got Anne-Marie.
Anne-Marie.
She's recovering. Normally attends Perrysburg, but watching online for the first time.
Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, thanks for being here. I'm excited for what we have ahead, so I'm going to get back downstairs. And I know I interrupted.
No.
Hey, make sure you put that mic on. Ben forgot to turn his mic on at the 9 a.m. service, so
but it's the 11 o'clock service now.
11. It's
and
different.
God makes all things new. So here we go. We are getting ready to jump into a brand new series this weekend. So if you're joining for the first time, this is the perfect time to be here.
Yeah.
We're stepping into a series all about wonder, trying to experience that wonderfulness of Christmas.
Yeah.
And if you're anything like me, like Spencer and I, really, we want to create wow moments this time of year. I want to give wow moments to my kids. I think we all probably want to experience some wow Christmas moments, but so often with all the craziness that's going on in the world, the things that are happening in our lives, like it's just tough to pull that off.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just feels exhausting, and we sort of get distracted really from what Christmas is all about. And so in just a few minutes, Ben's going to remind us about that wonder.
Yeah, hopefully you've experienced some of those wows of the Christmas season in your life right now. A wow experience coming up is our Christmas services.
Yes.
I know Sarah and I are super excited for these. If you've never experienced a Cedar Creek Christmas before, you're in for a treat. So invite your friends, invite your family, and if you normally watch online, that's totally okay. But I know Sarah and I both would love to invite you into one of our physical campuses. Wherever you're located, come on in for any of the time, dates, and locations. You can go online to cedarcreek.tv/Christmas or just follow the link below in the chat as well.
Yeah, so we're getting ready to worship. We're going to tune in with our Perrysburg campus. And so wherever you're watching from, we just encourage you to lean in, maybe set aside some distractions, and use this time to connect with God.
Well, again, good morning and welcome to Cedar Creek. My name is Hayden. This is Berkeley and the rest of the band. Whether you're joining us here in the room or online or at our Oregon campus, man, we are excited to be singing together today. Let's worship. Where was the darkness when hope was restored? And where was despair when my God split the shores? Where was defeat when the Lord took a breath? When he stood in power by the grave that he left? Nowhere, nowhere, nowhere is fear when my King resurrects. Nowhere, nowhere, nowhere was the doubt when my King conquered death. Yeah. Where was the sorrow when dry bones arose? And where was the pain when the sick touched the road? And where was disgrace when the King laid to rest? The stronghold of sin by the grace he possessed. Nowhere, nowhere, nowhere is the fear when my King resurrects. Nowhere, nowhere, and nowhere was the doubt when my King conquered death. Yeah. Whoa. Sing this out together this morning. I see joy rising. Here we go. I see fear hiding, and I hear chains falling. I see walls shaking, and I hear doubt running. My God's on his way, yes, he is coming. And I see joy rising, and I hear hope calling. And I see fear hiding, and I hear chains falling. I see walls shaking, and I hear doubt running. 'Cause my God's on his way, yes, he is coming here. Now here, now here in his presence, where shame disappears. Now here, now here, I stand undefeated when Jesus is near. Now here, now here, now here in his presence, where shame disappears. Now here, now here, I stand undefeated when Jesus is near. And I see joy rising, and I hear hope calling, and I see fear hiding, and I hear chains falling, and I see walls shaking, and I hear doubt running. My God's on his way, yes, he is coming. And I see joy rising, and I hear hope calling. I see fear hiding, and I hear chains falling, and I see walls shaking, and I hear doubt running. My God's on his way, yes, he is coming. My God's on his way, my God's on his way, my God's on his way, yes, he is coming. My God's on his way, my God's on his way, my God's on his way, yes, he is coming. I love these moments that we get to sing together. And last week we introduced a song, and it's called Hymn of Heaven. And I think that this reminds us of the eternity that we get to spend with Jesus when we place our faith in him. Let's sing this together. Now I long to breathe the air of heaven, where pain is gone and mercy fills the streets, to look upon the one who bled to save me, and walk with him for all eternity. There will be a day when all will bow before him. There will be a day where death will be no more, standing face to face with he who died and rose again. And holy, holy is the Lord. And every prayer we prayed in desperation, the songs of faith we sang through doubt and fear, and in the end we see that it was worth it when he returns to wipe away our tears. And there will be a day when all will bow before him. There will be a 1,000 generations sing, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. And on that day we join the resurrection and stand beside the heroes of the faith, and with one voice 1,000 generations sing, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Forever he shall reign. So let it be today. We shout the hymn of heaven with angels and the saints. We raise a mighty roar. Glory to our God who gave us life beyond the grave. It's holy, holy is the Lord. So let it be today. We shout the hymn of heaven with angels and the saints. We raise a mighty roar. Glory to our God who gave us life beyond the grave. It's holy, holy is the Lord. It's holy, holy is the Lord. It's holy, holy is the Lord.
What's your next step on this life-changing adventure with Jesus? God has given you distinct abilities and passions. He has created you with a unique purpose, something far greater than you can imagine. There's a need for people to step up and make a positive and lasting impact right here in Northwest Ohio and beyond. Are you ready to embrace His call for your life and make a difference? Are you ready to live like it matters? Are you ready to lead?
Well, here at Cedar Creek, we are driven by that bold call, that life-changing adventure. And one of the ways we love to step into that is through the internship program. Spencer and I both had the opportunity to be an intern, and we have our unique stories, but it is life-changing. And really the purpose of it is to train and equip this next generation of leaders to go out into the world and make a difference. And a ton of our staff have been interns, which is super fun, but a lot of times they sort of launch out and do other amazing things too. And so we are so passionate about this program. Spencer, most recently you've been a part of it. Can you share like a big takeaway or an internship highlight?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, I've been thinking through this all weekend, just this question, and it's taken me till this moment to discover what the right answer is.
Here it is.
And
Okay,
so
we're ready.
You guys here are hearing it first. I lied to the 5 and 9 a.m. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's just the knowledge and the wisdom and the people that I got to be around and what they possessed and what they were able to pass on to me. Like just being around so many fantastic leaders, and on top of that, so many devoted Christ followers. It was truly an experience that I never would have imagined that I would ever step into. If you would have asked me in high school if I had ever done an internship through a church, I would have said, you're crazy.
Right.
So it is really cool to see the way that God has kind of used my life to put me where I'm at today. And the internship is a huge part of that. And so I don't know if you're watching and you're kind of thinking like, oh, the internship, is that something for me? Or maybe you know somebody who's pondering their next step in their life, or wherever you're at. The internship is such an amazing next step. I know for me, it took me months to decide if it was something that I wanted to step into. I had people asking me constantly about it. And so eventually I just took a leap of faith and said, God, I trust you with this.
Yes.
And, in the long run, it always works out. So it was such a great next step for me. And so again, if you know people, I'd encourage you right now, for those of you watching on Facebook, the other platforms, you could do this as well, maybe with just like a text or a phone call. But on Facebook, what's something cool that we could do is you can actually tag somebody in the comments and they'll get a notification through their
Love
phone.
it.
So if you know somebody 18 to 30 years old that you feel like would be a great next step for them, just tag them in the comments below and we'll see what happens. I think that could be a cool little nudge from God saying, hey, check out this internship. So for more details and all those fun things, you can go over to cedarcreek.tv/internships. I know that link is below in the chats as well.
Yeah, and for those of you that give financially at Cedar Creek, we just want to say thank you, because your generosity allows this internship program to have cool guys like Spencer be a part of it. And we are just so thankful for the ways that you faithfully support this mission. And if you are interested in an opportunity to give, maybe a year-end gift, we can't think of a better place to really invest in the lives here in Northwest Ohio, but all throughout the world, and really raising up that next generation of leaders.
Yeah. I'm looking at the Facebook chat currently right now, and Luke, one of our moderators today, he put internship class of 2001. Luke, I was 3 years old in 2001, so yes, that's me intentionally trying to make you feel old. So I'm only saying this because I'm behind a camera right now, and I know you're nowhere near me. So 2001, I was 3.
That's something.
It's pretty crazy, but hopefully that could be a next step for you to go into. Right now, we're going to transition into our weekend message, where today we're going to be beginning our brand new series called The Wonder of Christmas. I know Ben's super excited to be back live teaching after 5 weeks of At the Movies.
Yes.
So we're super excited to launch this and transition us into the Christmas season. If we're still with you.
We might still be with you.
We might still be with you.
Let's see if we can give some shout outs here to some people that are watching. We've got, I think we're ready. We're going to send it over to Ben.
Oh, great.
The journey, we are so glad that you're joining us today. We're starting a new series, and it is our prayer that you will enjoy it, but also really learn for whatever God has for you today. So enjoy.
Well, it is so good to see you in person. So I want to welcome all of our campuses, those of you watching online, on TV, the men at Toledo Correction. Will you help me in giving a rowdy welcome to everybody tuning in out there, just saying hello? Last few weeks have been fun. We've been at the movies, and if you're a little disappointed, like I was really hoping for movies, guess what you get for the next 30 minutes? Ta-da! Yeah, I got my good thing. It was a lot of fun. And if you have movie suggestions that you would love for us to consider next year when we bring that series back, you're welcome to send them to us. Send them to me at bens@cedarcreek.tv, but you got a little homework to do. You're going to have to try to incorporate a bottom line, because if you just give me your favorite movies, that's cool. But what we try to do is a little bit of what Jesus did. Take a modern day story, that's what movies are, and Jesus would weave spiritual principles through them. And so it was a lot of fun. If you didn't get to see it, those of you watch online, couldn't make it here or somewhere else in the country, sorry about that, but we did have a lot of fun here. But it's good to be back. And if you're sitting here today and excited about what God has for you, I know many of you, if you're like me, you woke up yesterday and on your news feed you saw the images of what took place in Kentucky primarily, but throughout the South, the devastation of the tornadoes. I talked to, I think, Lisa earlier. She has family down in Bowling Green. You see those images and it's heart-wrenching. And one of the questions that we get asked is, what are we doing as a church? And I just want to let you know that as a church, I'm so proud to be a part of a movement of people that is proactively partnered with organizations to have boots on the ground already there. And so when you give to God through Cedar Creek, it enables us to invest in this opportunity where Convoy of Hope is already bringing tarps and water, fresh water, cleanup crews to help with some of the relief. I've talked to a couple of different people who have family or friends down there, and they're already blown away by the support. And so I want you, especially those of you who give to God here, to be proud or thankful that you you get to be a part of a church that's like that. God is using you to make a difference. And I think we should continue to pray for those families, those individuals impacted by this. Obviously, it's devastating anytime. It's particularly difficult as you step into the holidays. And so let's keep them in mind. If I have any updates, I'll bring them back to you as we move forward. Today, we get to start a brand new conversation around the word wonder. It's something that we use at Christmas. It's the most wonderful time of year. We want to recapture the wonder. And so to get us started thinking about this, and particularly the subject that I want to step in today, I want you to think about a time when you were at the wrong place at the wrong time. When you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And if you're thinking like, well, that might be right now, I'm really glad that you're here. I hope I can change your mind, right? But sometimes when you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you know right away. Like you're like, okay, this isn't going to go well. And other times you think it's going to be great, and then you realize probably too late, like it was the wrong time, wrong place. I was in Istanbul, Turkey. It's particularly in the site of Constantinople, the ancient Roman city that's now part of Istanbul, Turkey. And we were visiting a church plant there and some pastors from different parts of the Asian, Eastern European continent. And we had an afternoon to take a boat tour of the Bosphorus, which is a large river-like body of water that connects Europe and Asia. Fascinating tour. And on the way back, we were navigating our way through Istanbul, Turkey, and a public anti-American march, jihad banners, all of this was turned down the street that a group of very American-looking individuals were walking down, myself included. It was wrong place, wrong time. The guide that we were with is like, hurry up, get into this little shop over here. So we scurried into the shop, and I remember pulling out a piece of clothing, and I'm looking at it very intently for 5 minutes. But what I'm really doing is paying attention to where are we at and what do I need to pay attention to? And it was only near the end of 5 minutes that I realized it was a woman's blouse that I was staring very intently at, and it was much too big for me, okay? It's like you don't think of wrong place, wrong time. A couple of years ago, I finally convinced my wife, Lauren, to take my daughter, at the time she was 13, Lydia, to Honduras, where we have a network of church partners, excited for each of my kids to get a little experience of that. So finally, it's like we navigate all of the complexity that comes with taking your kids out of the country, particularly to the third world. So, early part of 2020, we were all set to go, plane tickets, all of that. And there was this little thing in China, maybe you heard of it. It's like a virus, a corona something, but it's never going to come here, right? So we go. Yeah, laugh. Funny for you. Wrong place, wrong time, okay? We were in La Ceiba when it was like, Ben, everybody's shutting down. They canceled the NBA season. I'm in La Ceiba, Honduras with my 13-year-old daughter, and then the tour guide, or the pastor that was driving the van that we were with, kind of our guide for the trip, was like, they shut down the airport in San Pedro Sula. I'm thinking, I'm not even going to be able to get home. Wrong time, wrong place. How does it feel when you're there? It feels terrible. It feels wrong, anxious, annoyed. You feel helpless. And so thinking about that, well, what if there was another wrong place, but at the right time? Is that different? You know what this is called? This is called the gas station bathroom when you gotta go, okay? It's the right time. I mean, you gotta go now, but there is nothing right. There's no bathroom at the gas station is ever the right place, okay? Or when you need to meet somebody and you set up a time, but you end up at the wrong Starbucks or the wrong restaurant or whatever. Or have you ever done that? Maybe it's just me. Okay, how does it feel? It feels embarrassing. It feels awkward. It feels wrong, right? Okay, so what if it's more like the right place at the wrong time? You're at the right place. You know what this is called? This is called Costco on Sunday, okay? Don't do it, or any grocery store. It's terrible, right? Chick-fil-A at dinner hour. We went to the one on Airport Highway the other day. We didn't get our food till the next day. And we waited in line anyway. I was like, well, it's crazy, right? This is the Maumee Perrysburg Bridge at 5 p.m. For those of you that are down in Findlay, good luck with Findlay traffic, whoa. But Maumee Perrysburg Bridge, avoid that, right? This is how OSU felt against Michigan a couple weeks ago. They were... Oh, we got a few Michigan fans that remember how to clap. It's been a while. I'm sorry, I'm an equal opportunity offender, okay? I lost my coach. I'm dealing with all that. Okay, yes. This is when you show up early to the right place, just the wrong time, and you're like, how's it feel? It feels uncomfortable. Or are you too late? How does it feel? Feels uncomfortable. It's like when you're in a family gathering, the right place, but a fight breaks out between a couple of your siblings. It's like, this is the wrong time to be here. How do I get out of here? It doesn't feel right. What is it that we all want? Tell me, what do we want? Yeah, right? We want to be at the right place at the right time. Everything else just feels wrong. I'm a part of a group of pastors of multi-site churches. We're a learning cohort, so we travel to different each other's churches or different parts of the country to learn from a mentor who's done it for years. It's our way of investing in our churches, learning from each other, but also trying to be a pastor for the long haul, because it can be difficult. And one of the guys that I've met along the way is Josh Surratt. He is taking over for actually his dad down in South Carolina. If you're looking for a great church, this is him right here, by the way. If you're looking for a great church and you're visiting South Carolina during the lovely winter months of Northwest Ohio, I would highly recommend Seacoast. It's a multi-site church. Anyway, as we are learning together, we're talking about how he's a Cubs fan and I'm a Guardians fan. It's going to take a little while to get used to that. And we were reliving the World Series memories, which were easier for him than me. And I talked about, being outside of the stadium for game one. And he was like, oh, yeah, I really wanted to go to the first game at Wrigleyville. And, but it's a lot of money at the time. I had to fly, all of this stuff. And his wife was like, how often do the Cubs play in the World Series? You got to go. And he's like, all right. So he called up his brother, got plane tickets, they went, and they showed up the next day for the game just to be around Wrigleyville. Just to be in the vicinity was going to be great. They notice a line outside of the stadium, so they get in line. They're trying to figure out, I don't know, it's like, I'm curious, and they find out that this is where they release tickets the day of the game. If they don't get used or picked up or something, I don't know. And so there's no guarantee. They waited there all day, and they were the last two, by 7 o'clock, whenever the game time started, they were the last two allowed to buy tickets after the midway through the first inning, and this is the tickets that they got. Behind home plate. Right time, right place. I mean, this is crazy. They were talking to the people next to him. The guy's like, hey, how much did you pay for these tickets? He's like, face value, like $300. The guy doubled over. He's like, I paid $20,000 for these seats. It's like, what? To me, I've been selling those tickets fast, like 20 grand. Who pays that? Desperate Cubs fans, probably. Okay, that makes sense. This is what it's like to be at the right place at the right time, right? This is what we all want. This is what we ask God for. So today I want to talk about how you can be wowed by God's timing. In fact, I actually want to convince you that you can be wowed by God's timing. The problem is, we're not typically wowed by his timing. Most of the time, it feels like with God's timing, we're here, and we wish he would do more of this. And so when I say, hey, you could be wowed by God's timing, there's an element where you're like, oh yeah, I should be wowed by God. But if we're honest, and maybe you're better at this than I am, if we're honest, it just feels like God's timing is always off. And I think that's because we tend to overestimate. Maybe you're better at this than I am, but I tend to overestimate my ability to know the right time and the right place. And I think we have a tendency to overestimate the right time and the right place. And we underestimate what God may be actually up to, or sometimes what God is capable of. We assume that he should do it our way in our time. And so when we're waiting for an answer and it seems like it takes more than a tick-tock, it's God, what are you doing? It's wrong. It feels wrong. Or when we're worried about the future, it's wrong. Or when we're weeping over something that we're grieving. Like weeping and the grieving isn't the problem, but it's like, what do? We go to God, like, what? How did you get this wrong, right? God, why did you allow this to happen? Legitimate questions, but it just feels like God's timing is always a little bit off or wrong, or sometimes it just feels weird. Have you ever talked to somebody that feels like they're seeing Jesus in their toast, and that's a symbol that they should get a lottery ticket, but they didn't win at the lottery, but then when they were in line, they were reminded of this thing because there was a rock song on the radio, and it's like all of this timing gets a little weird, and the truth is, God's timing is mysterious. Why? Because you can't control it, and neither can I. But every single one of us are impacted by it. And I don't know if you've thought about this, but the tendency, the reality is when you look back, you have a lot more clarity of where God is at work than we do in the moment. So what I want to encourage you to do because of that, because in the moment it feels all wrong, but sometimes you look back and you go, man, it felt wrong a long time ago and now it feels better. But what I want to encourage you to do when you feel like you're at the wrong place at the right time, or the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place at the wrong time, or even the right place at the right time, I want you to approach that moment with wonder. I wonder what God's up to. Instead of it just being plain wrong. God doesn't feel right. Feels like you're late, but I wonder what you're up to. When you're worried, right? When you're worried, it's like, okay, God, I'm worried about all of this stuff, but I wonder what you're up to, right? When you're weeping, should you grieve? Yes. This doesn't mean just put a smile on your face. Know that God's near, especially if that's you today, to the brokenhearted. Grieve, yes, but don't stop wondering. And even when it's weird, how do we do that? The bottom line. The bottom line is this: you got to trust God today because it positions you to be wowed by his timing tomorrow, in the future. It may not wow you in the moment, but what you've got to do each moment, no matter where you find yourself, is to trust him in that moment. It's going to require some I'm not going to get this right, Sean. Sean gave me a word to fit in before the service. Yeah, it's abnegation. Abnegate. I'm not even getting it right. So some people send me random words to fit in. So Sean, you're over there. You win, all right? You win, okay? That means you got to surrender. It means you got to open up your hands and go, okay. You know what it fundamentally means is that you're not the main character of your story. You're not the author. God is. And so you've got to trust him and the story that he's writing, or you can try to do it your own way. Now, trusting him doesn't mean it's going to make him do it in your time and in your way. No, it positions you to be wowed. That's what wonder is. It's like, okay, God, I see that you are writing something here that I can't, that I'm not the author, I'm not the power, I'm not the authority here. Let me give you an example of what that could look like. Like for those of you that are showing up at church, watching online or watching here, it's really easy in our culture. It's easy for me to do this, to come in wondering, what am I going to get out of this today? Am I going to like the music? Who am I going to see? Some of you come in with a list of things that you're waiting for me or any other pastor to check off for you. And so you basically feel like you are the author, the main character, that it revolves around you. And it starts to feel a little bit like me. And yet if you could shift and start to go, okay, God is the one writing the story. If he's the main character, then the question isn't like, what am I going to get out of this? The question is, God, what story are you writing here? And what role do you want me to play today? I'm telling you, that shift, simple as it is, it's not easy, friends. But that shift changes the way that you show up at a weekend service. Instead of you looking at it about you, you're going, okay, there are other people here, and God may be writing a bigger story. And God, I don't want to miss what you're trying to do in me or around me. It changes the way you show up at work. It changes the way you show up at your class or in your neighborhood or in your marriage or in your family. When it's beyond yourself, then you can begin to wonder. And that's what it looks like to trust God, moment by moment. And I believe it puts you in a position to see what God is up to. Maybe not every moment, but it puts you in a position to be wowed by what God does over time. And so that's pretty much the message. I mean, you could go home now if you wanted to. I mean, the closing song is evidenced by Josh Baldwin. You can put it in your AirPods and listen to it on the way out to the car and get to brunch early, right? You know, it's like, I'm not sure what I would do if you all left right now. It'd be a lot awkward. But I'd like to tell you a bit of a Christmas story where I think you can see it at work. It comes from the Gospel of Luke. If you're not familiar with the Gospel of Luke, Luke was a first century physician, a scholar. He was an educated individual. And how did Luke get to the work? Well, how did he sit down to gather all of these eyewitness accounts and write them down? He was hired by a kingdom-minded, wealthy individual or group of people, scholars debate, named Theophilus. Most tend to believe it was one individual that sent him out on this research project to gather evidence to verify what Theophilus already believed was true, but wanted verifiable eyewitness accounts about Jesus' life because the stories were so hard to wrap your mind around, even for the first century. And did you know that God uses kingdom-minded, wealthy individuals to advance his mission? In fact, if you look back throughout history, some of the revivals that you see, some of the things that we get to celebrate today were accelerated by a handful of small individuals that you oftentimes don't know their name, who believe that God put them here to accelerate kingdom work. And I believe that that's some of you. Not all of us, but I think that's some of you in the role that God has you to play. Are you stepping into that? Because if you don't take time to accelerate kingdom work where you see it, use some of the resources that God has exponentially given you to accelerate that, then we miss. Imagine where we would be if Theophilus didn't do this. We wouldn't have the Gospel of Luke today. So it's profound. Because of his investment, because of their investment, we're able to read that when Herod was king of Judea, there was a Jewish priest named Zechariah. And he was a member of the priestly order, Abijah. And his wife Elizabeth was also from the priestly line of Aaron. This seems like a lot of context that doesn't always seem helpful to us. Couple things I want you to notice. When Herod was king of Judea, you also see the lineage of Zechariah and Elizabeth, this married couple that we're going to talk about in a minute. Why is this important? Because the first century writers weren't trying to write a fairy tale. They weren't trying to write some cute Christmas story. They were recording the stories that they heard of actual people in time, and they believed that this is what actually happened. So you may have a different opinion about what Christmas is all about, but let's not be confused. The first century writers were reporting what they thought actually happened. And the reason they give this detail is so that you could go back and verify what they said was true. You could begin to look, did these people exist? How do we know it was Zechariah? Well, he was a member of the priestly order of Abijah. This was an actual person that happened in actual time. And this lineage actually matters, especially in a Jewish context. And so he wants to talk about these two. He gives some context so that he could verify or anchor it in human time. And here's what we learn about Zechariah and Elizabeth. It says that Zechariah and Elizabeth were righteous in God's eye. They were good people. They were careful to obey all of the Lord's commandments and regulations. They had no children because Elizabeth was unable to conceive, and they were both very old. And so we learn about the character and integrity of this couple, and he partners that with something that would have been perceived as a curse from God, not a blessing. They had no kids, and they were very old. If you or someone you know can't have kids, you know how tough this is. You know how painful, how embarrassing. Their whole life they've been asking God, waiting, worrying, weeping, never the right time, never the right place. But in the midst of all of that, they continued to trust God, even though they had to give up a dream. For those of you that are experiencing this, you know how this feels, how difficult this is. And so that's why he's putting these two important things together. And to give context to what happens when Zechariah was serving at the temple. One day, Zechariah was serving God in the temple, for his order was on duty that week. What does that mean? He was a priest, probably in another village outside of Jerusalem, and think campus pastor in Cedar Creek context. And so once in a while, that order would be invited to come to the temple in Jerusalem, a beautiful, special place, and they would basically deliver the worship service. So it was his priestly order that was on for delivering the worship service, and as was the custom of the priests, he was chosen by lot to enter the sanctuary of the Lord and burn incense. He was the guy basically conducting the worship service. How was he picked? They cast lots. Think of it as like a roll of the dice. We would say that that's random. They would say that that's how God writes his story sometimes. They believe that God is involved in our everyday life. So think of the significance of this. Zechariah is a righteous person. It wasn't his decision. He wasn't voting or running for this, but he was at the right place at the right time. And this may be the only time in his life when he's been selected to conduct the worship service at the temple. I mean, this is a big deal. To put it in today's vernacular, if you watch The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, it's like he was given the rose, right? Or if you're an NFL fan, he was the number one pick in the draft pick that day, or he's a top 10 finalist. This is a big deal, and he was serving God at the temple. Here's what the temple looks like. This is where the temple sanctuary is, right inside of those doors, and so the priest would stand like here and offer prayer or worship service. He would go in and pray there and then come back out, and the men would be surrounding the temple. This is the inner court, and the women would be out here in the outer court. They would be worshiping together. You might not like the separation, but that's the way that they did it back then. And so this is a big moment for Zechariah. And as he enters to basically conduct the worship service, here's what happens. It says, while Zechariah was in the sanctuary, the door was closed, they can't see, an angel of the Lord appeared to him standing to the right of the incense altar. Zechariah was shaken and overwhelmed with fear when he saw him. Why was he shaken and overwhelmed with fear? Well, how would you feel if suddenly an angelic figure, was leaning against the LED wall in the back here like, hey, what's up? You'd be like, that's a little weird. And then you start to take it in. How'd they get there? Out of nowhere. I didn't see them walk. I mean, all of these questions, the same questions that you would ask, he is asking. That's why the angel says, you go to the next slide. Yeah, the angel says, don't be afraid, Zechariah. God has heard your prayer. Your wife Elizabeth will give you a son, and you are to name him John. Now, I don't know what you would be thinking, but I would be thinking, who put what in my brownie this morning? It's like, this is not cool, okay? I'm at the right place at the wrong time. I'm seeing things. And then as the message starts to set in, like, wait, did he say I'm having a son? Like, sure, we've wanted that our whole life, but bro, is God on AOL dial-up? Has he been ghosting me? Because I don't know if you've noticed, imagine your 80-year-old grandparent, parent. If you're 80 years old, imagine God showing up to you and being like, hey, you're going to have a kid today. Right, yeah, good laugh, right? It's like, yeah, that'd be weird. Some of you are like, I gave that up a while ago. Grandparenting is great, okay? It's good, we're good. It'd be weird. It'd be more weird than wonderful. And so what the angel says next to give context to this actually doesn't help. He says, he will be a man with the spirit and power of Elijah. He will prepare the people for the coming of the Lord. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children. He will cause those who are rebellious to accept the wisdom of the godly. I don't know how this sounds to you, but it's almost like Yoda and Joe Rogan and a pastor all enter a bar and have a conversation at once, you know? It's just weird. Power and spirit and prepare and heart of the children towards, it's just awkward. But Zechariah, he recognized those words. Like he knew what he was referring to, because 400 years earlier, think like almost more, just under 2 histories of our country back to back. 400 years before this, a prophet and a preacher named Malachi, many believed he was the last prophetic voice to speak on behalf of God to the nation of Israel. You know what his final words were? You can look it up in the end of the Old Testament in your Bible right now. It says, look, I'm sending you the prophet Elijah before the great and dreadful day the Lord arrives. His preaching will turn the hearts of fathers to their children and the hearts of the children towards their fathers. Now, there's all sorts of significance in this that I don't have time to go into. But these were the last words that Malachi said. And after Malachi, Israel really had no influence. They had no power. They had no king. They had no prophets. Their temple was torn down. Felt like God was silent. He abandoned them. And now, after 400 years of wondering about God's timing as a nation, God is showing up now. He's showing up to Zechariah, an 80-year-old. He's trying to take all of this in. He spent his whole life waiting on a son. And because he casted lots this day, it was his day. Maybe it was supposed to be somebody else's. And this angel shows up. A son that has the spirit of Elijah. Like the fulfillment of potentially this passage that has a connection to the Messiah. This would be a perfect opportunity to wonder. It would be a profound moment where it feels like wrong timing on so many levels. But instead of wondering, look at what he says. How can I be sure that this is going to happen? Like, I'm an old man, and my wife is also well along in years. Do you know what, in the original language, you know what that phrase, well along in years, means? She old, okay? That's she old. It's like, this can't be right. This is wrong. This is all wrong. He overestimates his ability to know the right time and the right place. And he underestimates God's capacity. He underestimates the story that God may be writing, and I think that's what we do. I think we look at the timing of our life and we think it doesn't make sense to us. God, clearly, you're getting it wrong because it doesn't fit into our framework. Friends, I'm trying to convince you that trusting God today positions you to be wowed by his timing. Either you think you're the author and the main character, or you trust that God is. And even with hundreds of years in between, God is doing something amazing. And because Zechariah is a little bit out of position to be wowed, look at what the angel does. He repositions him. He says, I am Gabriel. I stand in the very presence of God. It was he who sent me to bring you this good news. Remember who the author is, Zechariah. But now, since you didn't believe what I said, you will be silent and unable to speak until the child is born, for my words will certainly be fulfilled at their proper time. Like God's timing. He knows what he's doing. So I think sometimes you're either going to be a part of God's timing, or you're going to be a part of God's timing whether you want to or not. You can either resist it, or you can receive it and wonder in the middle of it. But when you resist it, sometimes it's going to cost you. It's going to feel like God silences you, so that you remember who he is. So at this point, the angel's gone. I imagine he's in disbelief. Like, what does all of this mean? Have you ever replayed what just happened to try to connect dots? This can't be right. I'm going to have a kid. I mean, what? Unable to speak. And meanwhile, this service is going on and on and on. And there are people outside. Like, the timing for them is wrong. They're like, man, I'm going to miss brunch. This is weird. Wrong time to go to church. And eventually, here's what happens. He finally did come out, and he couldn't speak to them. And they realized from his gestures and silence that he must have seen a vision in the sanctuary. I would love to have been there for this moment. He comes marching out, and he's like, it's like, how do you gesture angel? Like, people would be like, you're crazy, right? So somehow, they come to the conclusion that God is the author, that God is speaking, that God had shown up. God reminds Zechariah who the author is, and he uses that to remind a community of people who the author is. And they're going to have a son, but he's not going to be able to talk about it until after the son is born. You and I, we are going to experience this timing one way or another. Resist it or trust it, it's up to you. Now, I have no idea how Zechariah told his wife. Most women were illiterate. They weren't taught to read. In that culture, that was common back then. Maybe she could, but if not, I would love to. I just start to chuckle at how did he give gestures about the angel and her having a baby, and that would just be weird. But eventually she conceives, and here's her response when she becomes pregnant. How kind the Lord is. How kind the Lord is. He has taken away my disgrace of having no children. Like, she's like, wow, look at what God is doing. Do you see the wonder? Like, God, I don't know why. I don't know how. I don't know why now. This feels weird, but I'm going to trust you. And so today, if you're worried, if you're waiting, if you're grieving, wonder, trust God today. Because I believe it's what puts you in the position to be wowed by his timing. Now, this story in and of itself is amazing. It's an amazing story. But God is actually writing something bigger that they can't even see in this moment. That there's a part of a bigger story that they don't fully understand. That God is doing more than sometimes we can see. Why? Because in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, not the 2nd week, not the 2nd month, the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent an angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a village in Galilee, to a virgin named Mary. She was engaged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of King David. And what does the angel say? You're going to have a son. Now remember, you see this at a moment in time. You see the lineage. You're connecting it to real people. These are all the things that the angel says connects it to past promises. These are fulfillments of God's promises about a Messiah coming. Put yourself in Mary's shoes. As exciting as it may seem to us today, thousands of years removed, clearly seeing all of the details, looking in the rear view, in that moment, there's something that had to feel off. It felt weird. It felt maybe even wrong, like not the right time, not the right place. But with a trusting heart, Mary asks a very similar question. How can this happen? Not, hey, I don't believe that this can happen. This doesn't seem right. She's wondering in this moment, I am a virgin. She was betrothed to be married, but they don't consummate their marriage until after the wedding ceremony. So it's like she's doing the science class all in this moment. She's like, this could look really bad. This could be difficult. Like, who's going to believe me? What's Joseph going to say? If you know this Christmas story, you know that Joseph has a hard time with the timing of all of this. I mean, put yourself in that story. To me, it would feel like all of my hopes and dreams were ruined. I mean, yes, I'm excited about an angel visiting me, but this is way out of my comfort zone here. This is not what I had hoped for in my life. But Mary wonders. She trusts God. She's trying to understand how all of this can happen. And look at what the angel says. The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. And the baby to be born will be holy. Say, what? And he will be called the Son of God. An ordinary, common, illiterate girl excited about starting her family in a small town in the boonies called Nazareth gets visited by an angel. I mean, people ask the question, Mary, did you know? Like, women were not always included in the study of Torah, and perhaps she remembered some of the promises that she had heard from the prophets of the old days, back when Israel had kings. The prophet Isaiah giving the hope that God himself would show up. Look at what it says in Isaiah. God told Isaiah, all right then, the Lord himself will give you this sign. Look, the virgin will conceive a child, and she will give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. Son of God. Like, this is 700 years prior to Mary, right? This is when Israel had kings. The context of this passage was another point in history that felt like wrong timing. King Ahaz was ruling over the nation of Israel, and he was struggling. He was threatened by 2 kingdoms. And he's like, God, why are you doing this? And he overestimated his ability to understand the right time and place, and he underestimated God's capacity in the moment. So God sent Isaiah the prophet to say, God's got this. You don't have to be afraid of these kings. God himself is up to something bigger than you can see. He will come and rescue himself. Trust God today, and it positions you to be wowed by his timing. But Ahaz didn't listen. And he sold the nation of Judah as slaves to the king, some of them as slaves to the king to try to preserve his freedom, and it ended up costing them more than that. It cost everyone everything, right? And so Gabriel now, 700 years after that moment, he's using those same words. The promise that was given 700 years before Mary was born, it's like now this is happening. It may not make sense to you now, but if you believe that God is the author, you can trust his timing today. And here's what's amazing. I'm not sure that Mary understood it all. I think that's partly why the angel said, hey, what's more is your relative Elizabeth has become pregnant in her old age. Yeah, this is before they had TikTok and Instagram. I know that blows your mind. Some of you, it's like, how can you survive? So her relative in a nearby whatever town, Elizabeth has become pregnant. People used to say that she was barren, but she's conceived a son and now is in the 6th month, for the word of God will never fail. And so it says that Mary hurried off to see her. She ran to see Elizabeth. How do we know this? I think in part because Luke interviewed either Mary or people who knew Mary who were closely connected with her. Like after she heard this, she ran to Elizabeth, to a family member. Why? Because she had questions. It wasn't just any family member, it was a trusted family member. And it wasn't just a trusted family member, she was the wife of a priest who had spent his life studying the scriptures, who could help her connect dots when the timing feels a little weird. We need life-giving friends like that who actually make a difference. And this is what group life is all about. When the timing feels wrong, when you're weeping, when you're struggling, this is what spiritual life-giving friends bring to us. People who can remind us to trust God, that his word never fails, that trusting God today positions you to be wowed by his timing. Like that's the kind of reminder that we need. And so when Mary shows up, for those of you that know the story, what happens? The baby inside of Elizabeth's belly leaps, it moves, it jumps. Why? Because she was 6 months pregnant, not 2 weeks. She was pregnant at the right time. And this leap connected the God story that he was writing, that inside of Elizabeth's womb was a son named John who would become John the Baptist, Elijah, preparing the way for who? Jesus, the baby in Mary's belly, who is the way, the truth, and the life, the Messiah, Emmanuel. It was after all of this that Mary then sang the very first Christmas carol, the Magnificat, right? She was wowed by God and what he was up to. She was realizing that verse 37 was true, that God's word will never fail. So friends, you can be wowed by God's timing, but you're only going to experience that when you trust that he's at work in 1,000 ways, and you may only be aware of 3 of them. Trust him, like he's the author. Christmas isn't just a cute story we tell kids at the holidays. It's another reminder to wonder, to be wowed by God, to trust him. So I want to talk practically about what that actually means. Like, okay, cool story. Wow. What does that look like for us today? Well, what they did in the story, one of the first things is they reflected on where God was at work in the past. I would encourage you over the next few weeks to look in the rear view of your life and see how God brought you to where you're at today. Because if you're like me, there are things that you can't take credit for. I came to the University of Toledo to, party on the weekends and get a degree to make a lot of money in my life, right? I had no idea. I had no intention of ever going to church. Look at God's timing and the path that God had me on to bring me here today. Even when I came to Cedar Creek, I didn't think I was going to become the next lead pastor of the church. I think the same is true for you. You know where else you can look? You can look at God's work throughout the Bible. Look at how he interacted with people in time, through time. Knowing God is the foundation to growing in your trust or your faith of him. We talk about this all the time. And so to help you with that practically, especially in the holiday season, we have a Living It Out daily devotional. It's Monday through Friday. We send a small devotional. We have a dream team that writes and speaks into this. And they have an Advent focus, a Christmas focus, helping you focus on the attributes of God, getting to know the God to help you trust his timing. And so if you want to get that, here's a simple way to do that. You can text CONNECT right now, wherever you're watching, to 419-419-0707. And one of the options is subscribe to the Living It Out. We can email it to you. It's available on our app, but it's a simple way to reflect and get to know God. Practically, like if you want to begin to experience this, if you want to trust God today, reflect on God's work in the past. Here's another one. It's to begin to share. Mary needed Elizabeth, and you and I need life-giving friends to help us connect dots, to help remind us to wonder when the timing feels all wrong. When you're worried or waiting or weeping or just feels weird, who is it that's helping you get through those moments? So if you're not in a group, it's maybe time to consider joining a life group, a life-giving group of people to help you in your life-changing adventure with him. Or if you stopped being a part of a group, maybe it's time to reconnect. And if you want to know how to do that, text the word CONNECT to 419-419-0707. And we're just trying to make it easy to help you take that step. And I know maybe it's not now, maybe it's in January. You know what else is a part of that story? Is Elizabeth played a role in inviting Mary to see what she couldn't see. And maybe God has a role for you to invite someone to see what they can't see. I mean, we have Christmas services coming up. Your invite, God put you in position of influence with other people to invite them. If you want an e-invite or a digital invite, you can text that same number, and it'll give you an opportunity or a link where you can start to invite people to Christmas. Join us in participating with the story that God is writing in our community by inviting people. Share with them what God is doing here and in your life with the people around you. Here's another way to grow your trust, and this is probably one of the best ways to grow your trust. It's to give. That's right. Giving isn't just some things that church people ask for. It's the practical way that we trust God first with our finances. If you think you're the author of your life, then you'll give when it feels right, when you've paid off everything else, because you are the one in control. But when you see that God is the author and the provider, and you were to trust him first, then we give back to him first, not because he needs it, but as a demonstration that we trust that he is the provider. He is the one who blesses. He is the one who we depend upon. And so ultimately, it positions you to be wowed by his timing, unlike anything else. I can't describe it to you. I just know that I've experienced it in my life. Giving is actually a marker of spiritual maturity. And so as you grow in your faith, this is something that you naturally, as you trust, why? Because as you trust God more, you open your hands more. Faith isn't an accumulation of knowledge. It is trust lived out in your everyday life. And one of those areas is our finances. And so maybe that's a step that you need to take. If you want to get started or start again, text the word CONNECT to 419-419-0707. Here's another way to grow and sustain your trust. It's to serve. It's to step outside of your world and begin to help other people in some capacity, not out of guilt, not out of manipulation, not because God's folding his arms over like, oh, no, out of your purpose. Like have the heart of Mary. I'm the Lord's servant. I will do whatever it is that you have of me. Maybe you're thinking, well, I don't know my purpose. We love helping people understand their purpose. That's what Growth Track is completely designed to do. You'll leave with a purpose statement that's unique to you. It's like a compass helping you navigate your everyday life. If you're thinking about quitting your job, don't quit before you go through Growth Track. I think it can help you make those decisions. And I know with the Great Resignation, many of you are thinking about that. Experience that first. Trust God in the midst of that. Maybe you're sitting here thinking, well, I can't serve, Ben. I'm too busy. I got too much going on. Or you used to serve, but you stopped. Now's the time. Your soul, Jesus taught this, your soul will starve if you're not serving. Why? Because in John chapter 4, Jesus says that our nourishment comes from doing the will of God, not just hearing about it. So serve. There's a group of you here that I don't want to miss. Before you can reflect and before you can share and before you give and before you serve, you got to take your first step of faith. Maybe you've been exploring Christianity or hearing about this, but you've never surrendered your life to him. It begins by seeing that the Christmas story is more than just a cute holiday story. It's God's redemptive work, redemptive timing for you. A first century pastor looking back at Christmas described it this way. He said, when the right time came, God sent his son, born of a woman, subject to the law. God sent him to buy freedom for you, for me, for us, who were slaves to the law. Slaves to sin is another word that you could put in there, so that he could adopt us as his very own children. Like, you matter to God. When God looks at you, he sees someone worth loving, worth being a part of his family. And so before you were born, the one who created our world, the one who created time, entered the time that he created as a babe in the manger at the right time to accomplish something for you at this time in history, to receive from him freedom and family. So if you've never surrendered your life to him, I want to give you a prayer. This isn't magic prayer. This is an example of offering, taking a step, your first step of faith to him. And so if you're sensing like this is the next step that you need to take, I would say that that's God's Spirit prompting you in your life. Pray this in the quietness of your heart with me. God, I surrender trying to be the author of my life, and I offer myself fully to you. I believe that Jesus came to earth, died, and rose again to buy my freedom. And allow me to be a part of your purpose and your family. I want to follow you from this day forward. Wherever you're watching, if you prayed this for the first time, today's your spiritual birthday. Like, you're forever a part of God's family. He has a life-changing adventure for you that we don't want you to miss. And so if you tell us, you text the word connect to 419-419-0707 and click the I made a decision. I'd love to snail mail you a Bible so that you can start encountering the Bible and learn a little bit about it. But I know that can be intimidating, so we have some videos and some resources that'll help you start that journey. We would love to celebrate with you. That's part of what our mission is all about, introducing people to Jesus. Today, my hope is that you all would trust God, that it would put you in the position to be wowed by his timing. And so we've prepared some space for you to reflect over the next couple of minutes. I want you to look at where God has been at work in your life, and I want you to say, okay, God, what's the next step you're inviting me to take? What role would you have me play? What step of trust is he inviting you to take? Will you reflect on that over the next couple of minutes? I'd love to pray for you. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the ways in which you work in our time. And God, I confess I don't always see it in the moment. I don't always agree with it. I ask questions about it, and you can take all of that. God, I pray that you would increase our wonder of you. Help us to trust you when we're waiting. For those who are worried, God, help them surrender their worries to you. God, for those who are grieving, would you make your presence tangible to them so that they know that you're close to the brokenhearted? God, when it just feels weird or not right, would you help us to trust you, to wonder in those spaces? And I believe when we see the evidence of your goodness all around us, God, it positions us to be wowed by you again and again. So help us do that today and through this holiday season. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks.
All throughout history, your faithfulness has walked beside me. The winter storm made way for spring. In every season, from where I'm standing, I see the evidence of your goodness all over my life, all over my life. I see your promises in fulfillment all over my life, all over my life. Help me remember when I'm weak. The fear may come, fear will leave. You lead my heart to victory. You are my strength, and you always will be. I all over my life, all over my life. And I see your promises in fulfillment, all over my life, all over my life. I see the evidence of your goodness, all over my life, all over my life. And I see your promises in fulfillment, all over my life, all over my life. So why should I fear? Oh, the evidence is seen. So why should I fear? And oh, the evidence is seen.
When we trust what God is doing today, even if something doesn't feel like the right time or the right place, we can have the assurance and the remembrance that it's all for God's timing in the long run, and everything works out well. Just hanging out with the students today, we got to talk about the meaning of Christmas and how the story ends well, from Jesus' birth to when he dies to when he comes
I love
back.
that. It ends well.
It ends well. So that's a good reminder today as we step in to whatever next step maybe you're pondering today. I know Ben talked about a bunch of different next steps in the service, and he usually brought up the word, texting the word connect to that phone number, 419-419-0707. And just a reminder, that phone number is not just a number that we put down to get all your information, to have you in our systems. That number is really a tool for you to be able to take a next step, whatever that next step looks like. Maybe it's baptism, maybe it's joining a group, maybe today you accepted Jesus into your heart for the first time ever, which today is your spiritual birthday.
Yes.
And as your church, we want to come alongside of you and celebrate that right by your side.
That's right. And maybe young adults, if you're listening, you're thinking about that internship,
Yeah.
you're interested, maybe that's the next step that God is asking you to take. And maybe timing wise, it all kind of lines up for you right now. And so as a reminder, you can go to cedarcreek.tv/internships, get all the information, take a look and see what it would potentially look like. We've got all the ministry information on that site, and then the ways to apply as well.
Yeah, definitely. The internship was super fun. I know we talked about it earlier,
Yeah.
but it is a great next step. If you're wondering about it, just take the next step, have the courage. You won't regret that. We've been seeing some different prayer requests roll in the different chats across the different platforms. And so I just wanted to let you know that as your church, we're praying for those. And if you have any additional requests, you can go online to cedarcreek.tv/prayer. And a few that we've kind of seen come through is Ashley. We see that you just had a baby, which is so exciting. And we're celebrating right alongside with you. But we know that can come with a lot of tiredness and stress, along with all the love that comes with having a baby. So we're praying for you. A few of you have mentioned the tornadoes that kind of ripped across the country. And so we are praying for the victims and just for the wreckage and all that craziness that's been going on. Kim, we see that you're not feeling well today, so you're watching online. Thanks for joining us. We're praying for you throughout that as well. We saw a few more trickle in, but we wanted to highlight a few. We are praying for every single one of those. And again, cedarcreek.tv/prayer for any additional requests that you may have.
Yeah. Well, it's been super fun to hang out with you guys during this 11 o'clock service. So we hope you come back next week. We're going to continue this Wonder series as we get closer to Christmas.
Yeah. See you then.